This is Professor Michael Chapman. I'm one of the most experienced IVF doctors in Australia. I believe that an important part that I can contribute is to educate patients in relation to fertility, infertility, and all that involves. These series of podcasts help to educate you. I hope they are helpful to you. If you wish to know more, however, I'm more than happy to have you contact me via email, which is profmchapman@gmail.com, or make an appointment to see me on 9138 4222. So now I might move on in the egg freezing story to actually what happens. What do you go through to get your eggs frozen? So egg freezing involves overriding the natural cycle. So in a natural hormone cycle, a woman produces one egg a month. And what we're doing with the stimulation regimes, where we give you a high dose of the hormones that normally your pituitary gland produces anyway, but at much higher doses. And what that higher dose is to stimulate multiple eggs to grow, multiple follicles to be formed, and within them each egg is growing. So that overriding of the natural process is what we aim to achieve. That natural process of an egg growing one egg a month actually is accompanied by something like 100 other eggs that start the journey to be the chosen one, but then they drop away during those first 14 days of a menstrual cycle. What we're doing with the stimulation with the drugs is to actually save a group of those eggs that otherwise would have been lost. And that means that when you're going through an IVF procedure and stimulation, you're not wasting eggs or using eggs that would be there in the future. We're actually saving eggs. So it doesn't change, for instance, the age of menopause. It doesn't use up more eggs. It's just saving ones that would normally have been there. So to do that, we will probably have a daily injection in your tummy for about 11 or 12 days of this FSH drug. It's a tiny little needle that that diabetics use 3 or 4 times a day. You're going to use it once a day. It'll involve blood tests on about 3 or 4 occasions at the clinic, and probably 1 or 2 ultrasound scans to watch the follicles growing and help us decide when it's the optimal time for the eggs to be retrieved. There's usually a second medication, which could be a tablet or an injection, which holds off your body naturally releasing the eggs. When it comes time to collect the eggs, you have a last injection called a trigger injection, which matures the eggs. And that injection is 36 hours before we go to collect the eggs. Collecting the eggs can be done in an operating theatre or in a procedure room, depending on what anaesthesia you desire. You can have a full general anaesthetic, but in fact, using gas, laughing gas in particular, and local anaesthetic in the vagina where the needle is going to be placed to collect the eggs, 99% of women are very comfortable with that, and it has the advantage you can just get up and go home afterwards. From a work perspective, that means that morning you certainly won't be going to work, but otherwise everything else is done outside of normal office hours. The bloods and the scans are done early in the mornings. And then the eggs are frozen and put aside for whenever you might wish to move forward with them. The risks of the procedure are minimal. We talk about risks of 1 in 1,000 of bleeding or infection, so that it is actually an incredibly safe procedure by general medical standards. The drugs themselves are short-acting. In the long term, there's no evidence that there's any detrimental effect on your ovaries or any way out of your health. So egg freezing is now becoming quite common. The cost of egg freezing in Australia is a little dependent on whether the doctor feels that you have a medical reason for freezing the eggs, which might be a lower level of AMH or other infertility problems like endometriosis. And in that case, you're covered in part by Medicare. The majority of patients, however, probably fall into what's called elective egg freezing and do not incur the Medicare rebates. And so the costs do vary depending on your Medicare eligibility. It also depends on the clinics. At Life Fertility Sydney, we believe we have the lowest price for egg freezing, for elective egg freezing, of around $3,300 for one cycle. Other clinics are charging $5,000 or $6,000. And associated with that, over the following years, the storage fees are obviously needing to be paid. If you go for the cheaper option, then the storage fees are slightly more expensive. But otherwise, if you choose the standard costing, it's around $5,500 plus the hospital fee of $1,000. So if you compare that with all the other clinics, I think you'll find that we're one of the cheaper versions, because we believe that fertility preservation with freezing eggs is a useful thing for women to be doing, and they should be thinking about it in the early 30s if there's if on the horizon childbearing is going to be in the distance. So that's egg freezing.
And don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website www.theivfjourney.com and select IVF Journey podcast from the navigation menu.